We are getting dangerously close to our goal. I've said for the past couple months, I want to get to 50,000 subscribers by the time the NFL draft starts. We are 817 away, only a couple weeks until the NFL draft. So if you haven't already, go down, hit that subscribe button for free Texans content all year long. We'll be giving you exclusive draft coverage. We go live for every single game here at Texans Today. So if you love the Houston Texans and want to be part of the #1 Texans community here on YouTube, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. Coming up here on Texans Today, we've got some news around C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson Jr., and their contract situations. We have even more top 30 visits coming in for your Houston Texans and some very interesting odds at the very end of the show that I think a lot of y'all will want to see. I've already talked about these odds before. Not these odds, but I've already talked about this story before, but very interesting to see some of what Vegas thinks about the Houston Texans. We'll discuss that at the end of today's program. All right, let's talk about the first topic on today's show, and that is C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson Jr. This coming in from Field Yates. The Texans have exercised the 2027 fifth-year options on contracts of QB C.J. Stroud and All-Pro defensive end Will Anderson Jr. per source. Stroud is now due $25.904 million in 2027, while Anderson is due $21.512 million. Both players are also eligible for extensions. Now, I think, a lot of people thought about C.J. Stroud. I've talked about C.J. Stroud, that the Texans were more than likely going to exercise that fifth-year option. But I had a lot of people message me on Twitter. I had a lot of people comment and say, Jeremy, why are the Texans giving the fifth-year option to Will Anderson Jr.? Does that mean they're not going to extend him? Does that mean the same as Stroud, that he has to wait until next offseason? No, that's not going to be the case. For me, this isn't really a surprise at all. The Texans are still likely to extend Will Anderson Jr. At the very end of Field Yates' tweet, he even said that, right? He said both of these guys are still eligible for extensions. All this does is tax on an extra year onto their rookie deal. They can still get extended. So you can add on however much you want on a new contract extension to the end of that fifth-year option. But it does help out the Texans if they do want to, give Will Anderson Jr. the bag, which I think they're going to give him the bag. Basically, this allows you to kind of stretch out that money a little bit more and make it where it's not a astronomical cap hit for the very beginning of that contract extension. C.J. Stroud, though, on the other hand, I've talked about it before. I don't think he gets extended this offseason. I actually think it's better for C.J. Stroud himself to not get extended this offseason because he's coming off a very bad run in the playoffs for the Houston Texans. So I think the fact that, he's getting the fifth-year option, he'll get a chance to prove himself. If he plays really well this year, he's going to get paid next offseason. There's a ton of quarterbacks that are going to get paid next offseason. I talked about that in a video prior. I'll go ahead and put that in the comment section and description of today's show. But C.J. Stroud, more than likely going to get paid next offseason. The fifth-year option, though, that doesn't mean that Will Anderson Jr. is not going to get a contract extension this offseason. And I think it might happen sooner rather than later. I would not be shocked if we saw a Will Anderson Jr. extension before the NFL draft. But I want you to predict it for me down below. Do you think Will Anderson is going to get extended before the NFL draft? We're weeks away from the draft. Reminder, we'll be bringing you comprehensive draft coverage here at Chat Sports around the Houston Texans, around every single team. Let me know what you think. Predict it. Do you think Will Anderson gets that extension before the NFL draft? Give me a yes, give me a no down below in the comment section. As I said, I wouldn't be surprised because there is, movement on both sides. Will Anderson said earlier this offseason he wants to be a Texan for life. The Houston Texans absolutely love Will Anderson Jr. You have not heard any bad things said about Will Anderson throughout really the past couple of years, right? Nick Caserio sings his praises. DeMeco Ryans absolutely loves him. Matt Burke, the defensive coordinator, says he's the best player in the league. So there's movement on both sides. Both sides want to get it done. I think it's just, coming down to the details of the contract. But when it's all said and done, I think for sure by the end of the offseason, he's going to get an extension. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if we see it in the coming weeks. Now, let's go on to the Texans' top 30 visits because we've actually already broken down a ton of them. These 9 players we've discussed on the channel so far. Jalon Kilgore, defensive back from South Carolina. Adam Randall, running back from Clemson. Kadyn Proctor, offensive lineman from Alabama. Caden McDonald, defensive tackle from Ohio State. Keontae Scott, defensive back from Miami. Charles Demmings, defensive back from SFA. Emmanuel Pregnon, offensive lineman from Oregon. Christian Miller, defensive lineman from Georgia. And Tyler Onyedum, defensive lineman from Texas A&M. We've discussed all these players, but we have even more top 30 visits for your Houston Texans that we need to discuss here on today's program. First up, another defensive tackle. The Texans are not shying away from letting everybody know they are going to draft some defensive linemen in this year's NFL draft. Dominique Orange, maybe one of the better nicknames in this draft, the Big Citrus. He has a top 30 visit with your Houston Texans. Mammoth of a human being, 6'4", 325 pounds. And I know the numbers aren't, eye-popping for this season, but he is a block eater. He is somebody that is going to take on 2, 3 offensive linemen and just hold it down in the middle of that defensive line. He's not going to rack up tackles, right? This past year, 18 tackles. The year prior, 24 tackles. Even though he did have 4.5 tackles for loss in 2024. He's not somebody that is going to pressure the quarterback. He's not going to get you sacks. But he is somebody, like I said, that will be good in run stuffing, a good interior defensive lineman that could really help out this Texans team in terms of stuffing the run. They met with another defensive lineman, though, for a top 30 visit. And this guy is somebody who is very, very intriguing to me. It's Zion Young. He is a defensive end from Mizzou this past season. 38 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. And he's somebody that has been getting a lot of round 1 buzz. And somebody that I think the Texans are pretty interested in, obviously, with that top 30 visit. Really having a breakout year in 2025, right? Before in 2024 and 2023 was a decent player. Previously played at Michigan State in 2024, transferred to Mizzou, got 2.5 sacks, 5.5 tackles for loss. This year, though, he stepped his game up big time. 52 pressures, 6.5 sacks, 16.5 tackles for loss, 42 tackles. He was on a tear for Mizzou, and obviously you see by the C on his chest, was a captain this year for the Mizzou Tigers. So the Texans showing interest in defensive line and really not shying away from, tackling one of their needs in the NFL draft. And obviously, they made moves in free agency. They re-signed Sheldon Rankins. They re-signed Naquan Jones. They signed Logan Hall, the former U of H Cougar, who gives you inside-out flexibility, right? He can play defensive tackle, that 3 technique. He can also bump out to defensive end. But I think the one thing that I've noticed is that the Texans, they want to, have a dominant defensive line, right? And they want these guys to be fresh. They want to be able to rotate them in and out. Right now, I know they signed Robinson D-Rob this offseason to a 1-year contract in free agency, but I still think they're looking for that rotational pass rusher to really, replace Derek Barnett. He was a good player for the Texans this past year. They decided to let him walk in free agency, and I think they're going to try to fill that gap in the NFL draft. Maybe it's a Zion Young. Maybe it's somebody later on in the draft, but that's definitely a position that the Texans are looking at. And I know it's a position that not a lot of people think is a big need for the Texans, defensive end 3. You think of, we have Will Anderson. We have Danielle Hunter. Why do we need another defensive end? Well, they want to keep those guys as fresh as possible. And believe it or not, Derek Barnett, other defensive ends on this team from this past season, they were able to rotate in and get pretty good pass rush whenever Will Anderson, whenever Danielle Hunter needed a breather to keep them at 100% throughout most of this past season. Now, coming up, I have more top 30 visits from the Houston Texans, plus some odds that I think a lot of y'all will find very, very interesting. Before I get into that, though, make sure to check out our merch shop. We have our brand new show logo. Shout out to my guy, Arnold. He absolutely cooked with this design. This is our new show logo here at Texans Today. You can get that in black, navy, or that H-Town blue. We also have 2 other dope t-shirts if you want to get our Swarm Patrol t-shirt. The best thing about this, all these guys are going to be on the team next year. And it's, I like jerseys, but you don't always want to wear jerseys out whenever you're going to the bar, whenever you're going to hang out with friends. This is a really comfortable t-shirt that looks really dope. And then our newest t-shirt is our Will Anderson Jr. Terminator t-shirt. We talked about him at the top of the show. He's getting that extension, so why not rep Will Anderson, rep H-Town with this awesome design? All of that is available at this link right here, chatsports.com/HOU shop. You can check that out. I'll put that in the comment section and description of today's program. Let me know if you want any other t-shirts, any other designs for future t-shirts here at Texans Today, because the more shirts y'all buy, the more shirts that I'll be able to make here for our merch shop. All right. Let's talk about another top 30 visit for your Houston Texans. Jalon Black, running back from Indiana. And luckily for all of y'all, my wife, she is an Indiana alum. I watched every single Hoosier game this past year because my wife is a massive fan. And Jalon Black, he was part of a running back duo that was very impressive for the Hoosiers this past year. He's not, a massive guy, 5'10", 210 pounds, but I think he's a really smart runner. He was able to really get the most out of every run, really find the holes that the Indiana offensive line were able to create this past season, and really pick up, tough yardage to allow Fernando Mendoza to get into second and medium, third and medium situations this past year and eventually win the college football playoff. Jalon Black, he projects as more of a late round pick, somewhere, 5th, 6th round, but the Texans, they added, David Montgomery in a trade this offseason. So you have him, you have Woody Marks. Running back isn't a top need anymore, but they definitely still want to add another running back in the draft. Maybe it's somebody like a Jalon Black. They also had top 30 visits with a pair of tight ends. The first one, Joe Royer from Cincinnati this past year, 29 receptions, 416 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's a really good receiving threat. We'll talk about him and more of these guys whenever we do a more comprehensive video on the Beast and Dane Brugler. But Joe Royer, he's a mid-round option if you want a good wide receiver 2 receiving threat. He's somebody who maybe doesn't wow you with his athletic ability of, being able to run a fast 40 or a insane vertical, but he has really good ball skills. And as a tight end too, I think he could be really good in an offense. The Texans, they'd run a lot of 12 personnel, which means a lot of 2 tight end sets. So they could use possibly another tight end, especially if they don't really trust Cade Stover. The other top 30 visit, this one was a little bit more perplexing to me, was Miles Kitselman from Tennessee. We actually have a Tennessee Volunteers fan here. He goes by the name of Joey Peterson. He has his own channel for Tennessee. If you are a Tennessee football fan, I asked him about him. I said, hey, Texans have a top 30 visit with Miles Kitselman. What do I need to know? He said, brick hands. So, 25 receptions, 250 yards this past year for the Volunteers. Maybe not the receiving threat at tight end that you would want. And, the Texans, they already signed Foster Moreau, who is an excellent blocker. So I don't know if the Texans need to go ahead and draft a, block-only tight end. But that's basically what the vibe I got from Joey Peterson was that he's a tight end 3. He's going to block. That's pretty much it. Maybe a special teams guy as well. His round grade, probably more of a 7th round to maybe even a UDFA signing. But Texans brought him in for a top 30 visit. Last up on this News and Rumors episode of Texans Today, some very interesting odds around defensive lineman Dexter Lawrence. We talked about him after the news came out that he was requesting a trade from the New York Giants, and I talked about him possibly being an option for the Houston Texans. Now, I saw some odds around his basically next team if he were to be traded. Look who the number 2 team is. The top odds right now, Los Angeles Chargers. Second best odds, your Houston Texans. I'm not saying that they will go ahead and trade for Dexter Lawrence, but I do find it interesting. Vegas, they do have a way of knowing certain things, and maybe they got some inside info, some inside intel, maybe a little Diana Rossini scoop around whether or not the Houston Texans were interested in Dexter Lawrence. Coming in third, tied, is the Tennessee Titans and the Cincinnati Bengals. So very interesting odds. If you want to know more about my thoughts around Dexter Lawrence and a possible trade, I actually made a video. It's already on the channel. This is what the thumbnail looks like. You can go ahead and look at my full thoughts on a Dexter Lawrence trade for the Houston Texans. All right, that's all I have for you on today's show, folks. If you made it to the end of today's video, make sure to give me a follow on X. You can follow me at Jeremy Chuggs. My DMs are always open. And if you made it to the end, we're doing something right? So go ahead, hit that subscribe button for free Texans content all year long. If you're a real Texans fan, you'll go down and hit that sub button. It's 100% free, and you get Texans news and rumors videos all year long.